A few weeks ago, when the new Duel Links ban list got announced, as well as the skill changes that they were doing, I got a couple comments on that video that I kind of forgot about doing this, but they had said that, hey, do you realize that almost all of these changes are the ones that you called to happen in your really long Duel Links video? The video they're talking about is Duel Links is a beautiful mess, which is something that I spent weeks making, months making if you consider the time I spent playing Duel Links to make that video, but it was a really good video, I felt, and I got a lot of fantastic feedback from it. But one of the things that I did in that video, or two of the things I did in that video, is at the beginning I mentioned some skills that I felt need reworks, and at the end I mentioned some cards and some forbidden and limited lists, just design changes that I felt needed to be done to make the game as good as possible. Because just in general, I think this is worth mentioning. Anytime that I'm critiquing something, it's because I want it to be better. In the case of Duel Links, I want it to be a good platform for casual and competitive players. And what I kind of said in that video is that I felt that it was really cool for casual fans of the anime, but the more competitive you got into the game, it seemed like the less fun it got, and the game showed all of its flaws when you got to the higher ranks in King of Games or played the KC Cup for hundreds of hours or whatever it was, and I felt that that wasn't right, so that's why I made that video. And luckily, almost all the things that I asked to have changed ended up getting changed, and that's what we're going to look at in today's video. We're going to play some clips, we're going to respond to them, how Konami actually did them, and I don't know if this necessarily means that Konami is watching my videos. I think it's likely that at least one or two people that work at Konami saw that video. Konami does keep tabs on many of the top YouTubers, and that video had a lot of views and a lot of positive feedback, I think, so I don't think it's that far-fetched to say that Konami, or at least a couple people from Konami, watched that video and maybe took some inspiration from it for their recent ban list changes. In general, skills are either grossly overused or horribly underpowered. I very rarely found a skill that was fair and that people were using. The ones that are overpowered don't even really feel like they were tested, and if they were tested, they weren't against actual competitive players. I think of things like Cyber Style, which I'm really conflicted on. I do want to mention that because of all the skills that I'm going to talk about and complain about, I guess, Cyber Style is by far the most skill intensive of these abilities. It gives the player that's using it a lot of sort of opportunities to use it or wait on it, and I think that player skill really does show up when they're using Cyber Style. However, it's way too powerful, and about 50% of your games are going to be against Zane if you jump on ladder right now because of how good the skill is and how many different decks it goes with. I think a badly designed skill that isn't skill intensive is Endless Trap Hell. First off, it's a little surprising that Konami puts Hell into their game. They usually try to not do that kind of stuff, but the name is fitting because if you play against an Endless Trap Hell deck, it'll feel like an Endless Trap Hell. This skill is horribly overpowered, poorly designed, and I have no idea why they put it in the game. And then at the bottom of the barrel of degeneracy, we have Life Cost 0. This is probably the most tilting skill that I've ever faced against. I think the most tilt that I ever got on stream was against a Life Cost 0 decks. This is the times when I would play against those types of decks, quit the stream right afterward because I was so salty. So as you can see, of the three skills that I called into question, two of them actually did get nerfed, and they got nerfed in ways that I wouldn't actually have imagined Konami would nerf them, but I think it's really cool nevertheless. So in the case of Cyber Style, the skill now does not allow you to use the Proto Cyber Dragons for anything besides fusion summons, and I think that's really cool. I think that's a really awesome change. The skill getting nerfed has affected some decks, like for example UA are now basically unplayable. They've pretty much been nowhere on the competitive ladder or doing well in tournaments at all. However, decks like Vampires, which was probably the other big deck that used Cyber Style a lot, that deck is still very good. There's a variety of skills that can support Vampires, but just in general, I'm really happy to see the Cyber Style thing nerfed because, man, it was so bad at the time that I made that video. Pretty much every other game, I think I said in there 50% of the games were against Zane, and I really felt like that. Everyone was using Cyber Style. It was just way too good and way too punishing for slower strategies that couldn't put a lot of damage on board because you would just get Cyber Styled into oblivion. In the case of Endless Trap Hell, they technically did not hit that skill. However, they hit Amazonas really, really hard on the ban list, which was the deck that was abusing that skill the most. I think that in general, it's in an okay spot right now, not nearly as annoying as it was when I made that video. As for Life Cost 0, oh my gosh, my least favorite skill in the entire game. They pretty much nerfed it to become unplayable. which is perfectly fine because I hate that skill. But the way that they nerfed that skill is by making it so you can only use one zero cost thing per turn, or I guess it's once per duel. So you can only use like Cyber Signs effect once for free after you use life cost 0 instead of an unlimited amount of times. What happened because of this is that pretty much no one plays life cost 0 decks. Once again, just like in the case of Zane, I'm completely okay with this. I know some people might want every single skill to be viable, but I think in the case of things like life cost 0, they're just so degenerate and so overpowered that they just should not be in the game at all. So Konami really did do good work with these skill reworks. I think that in the case of all three of those skills that were the most annoying skills by far when I made that video, they pretty much fixed all of them. And actually, Cyber Style is still seeing use in some sort of Cyberdark decks. A lot of people are playing Cyberdark decks, and people are playing Cyber Style in there. So it's still seeing play, just not as much play as it did before the nerf. Konami won't hit pack super rares and ultra rares, and I get it. Like, I understand why they don't do that. I understand that they want people to feel like their investments matter. However, what ends up happening is they hit like all the rares in a deck to make the deck like unplayable, where in reality they could have just like semi-limited one of the super rares or ultra rares and the deck would have been playable but not tier 1 status. I think people in the TCG often talk about that they like when Konami hits the consistency in the power level of the deck, but the deck is still playable. Well, in Duel Links, pretty much every time there's been like a tier 1 or tier 0 deck, the deck just gets hit into oblivion, which while yeah, your investment is secure as far as the super rares and ultra rares go, even though they hit just rares, you still like can't play the deck competitively. So I'd like to see them sort of revise the system. I think the players would complain less than Konami thinks they will. The reason I say this is that all the time, I mean, in general, if a card is a super rare or ultra rare in a pack, Konami is just not going to touch it. I think this is a horrible idea and also will be like an issue like going forward. It just seems like a bad idea in terms of longevity, mainly because the super rares and ultra rares are often the better cards in the pack. Therefore, you can't hit any of the better cards. I think this creates a huge issue with cards like Treacherous Trap Hole and Hey Trunade. Those cards absolutely should be on the ban list. They're like, those are some of the most degenerate cards in the entire game, and I think likely those two cards in particular will be the cards that Konami is first willing to sort of go off of their previous idea about the Forbidden Limited list. It seems like those cards just have so many complaints surrounding them. They're super bad to play against. There's almost no counters for them. I mean, just to put it in perspective for people that don't play Duel Links, in Duel Links, Treacherous Trap Hole is so overpowered that even in 20 card decks, people are playing 2 or 3 copies of the card just to see it in their opening hand. And they're even doing that in decks with other trap cards. It is just insane how powerful Treacherous Trap Hole is, but it's a super rare, so with Konami's current system, they actually can't touch it on the Forbidden Limited list, which creates a huge issue, and I think that they can't stick to that much longer. They're going to have to hit Treacherous Trap Hole at some point. It's actually kind of crazy looking back on that and realizing that I ended up being exactly right. Not only did they hit Treacherous Trap Hole, which I think a lot of people thought they would, or somehow they would have to hit it just to make the game playable again, they also hit Hey Trunade, which is something that I said in that video, but that many people said was not good enough to hit. But maybe it's just because I played a lot of back row decks. I really felt like Hey Trunade and Treacherous Trap Hole were two of the most polarizing cards in the game, because basically the decks that they were good against literally never had a comeback against them. Hey Trunade was basically impossible to deal with. There was no counterplay to your opponent activating a Hey Trunade. The closest thing to counterplay to that was summoning Silent Magician, and hopefully your opponent doesn't have 2 Hey Trunades, or Cosmic Cyclone and Hey Trunade. In the case of Treacherous Trap Hole, very often, even still with only 2 copies per deck, people are just flipping Treacherous and just winning the game immediately. I will say, in the case of these bans that they recently did, it pretty much just made it so Enemy Controller and Hey Trunade are just banned forever. The reason I say this is because almost no one's going to play those cards over a Treacherous Trap Hole, especially if you're playing a deck that has other real engine cards hit that are semi-limited. You're almost always going to be really struggling to play anything besides Treacherous, and I think that in general this has made certain decks better and certain decks worse. I will say that though, I really liked the hits that they did on the ban list. I talked about that in the ban list video itself, but I think that it's cool looking back and seeing that I was right. Like the 2 cards that made Konami break their let's not hit get cards in packs that are super rare higher were Hey Trunade and Treasure Trap Hole. So I'm really glad that I called those correctly because I think that they were worth hitting. Anyway though, thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this look at my older Duel Links video and how Konami, even if they didn't listen to me necessarily, how I ended up predicting what they ended up doing to fix Duel Links. And I thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you later. Goodbye.